right, so I am so excited to be here today with Nir Eyal. Yes, I got it right. Yes, I get it by his face. I think I did. And we're here with Association Chat. It's a very special Association Chat because I get to sit down with the author in person of two different books that I really love, and that's Hooked and Indistractable. So Hooked, and I'm speaking now to my wonderful audience here. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Hooked is the one that really hooked me, that really got me involved in reading your work and getting involved in understanding a little bit more about the Hook model, what it is to create a habit-forming product, and brought you near to my awareness. And then you came out with Indistractable. And now Indistractable is the Association Chat Book Club Book of the Month. So I have you here in Washington, D.C. I'm so excited. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So from Hooked to Indistractable, you created this framework for what it is to build something that is habit forming, and you teach us all about these ways that we can get people drawn in. And then with Indistractable, it seems that you are breaking things down. You're sort of reverse engineering for us. How can we be indistractable? How do we not get drawn in by these great toys and tools and technology? Yeah. Can you talk to me about where Hooked came from in the first place, and then the evolution to Indistractable?
Sure. So Hooked is really about how to build habit-forming products, how to create healthy habits in our lives, facilitated through technology. And Indistractable is about how to break bad habits that are facilitated oftentimes by technology. And so what I really want to do with Hooked was to kind of steal the secrets of the best in the world at creating these products that are so habit-forming, so engaging, right? So if we want to be really good at something, we want to look outside our direct sphere and look at who's best in class at whatever it is we want to do. If we want to be a fast runner, maybe we'll take tips from Usain Bolt, or if we want to be a great investor, we'll talk to Warren Buffett. If we want to be a great actor, maybe we'll talk to Keanu Reeves. You still here with me? Okay.
I love Keanu
Do you? Okay, I don't.
Okay, so anyway, yes.
But so the point being, we want to make sure that we look for the best in the business. And if you look at who makes the most habit-forming products on earth, you got to look at the technology companies, right? What are Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp and Slack, what are these companies doing that has so profoundly changed the day-to-day behavior of billions of people on the face of the earth? And so what I really wanted to do was to break down those secrets, those psychological tactics, so that we can all use them for good, right? So that we can use them to build healthy habits in our users' lives. And that's exactly what's happened since Hooked was published 5 years ago. Companies like Kahoot, the world's largest educational software, they use the Hooked model to get kids hooked to in-classroom learning. Fitbod is a case study that I put in the new edition that just came out of Hooked. They get people hooked to exercising in the gym. I worked with the New York Times, one of my clients, and I helped them build an app to get people hooked to reading the news every day. So the idea is, how do we use these same technologies to help change people's behaviors, to help them form healthy habits in their lives? But of course, the downside is that sometimes we have products that are so habit-forming, that are so engaging, that we overuse them sometimes. And so with Indistractable, it was really a very personal journey, in that I found that I was becoming oftentimes very distracted by different things in my life, particularly because with Hooked, when I wrote Hooked, it was a lot easier to write because I wasn't getting so many phone calls. I wasn't getting as many emails asking me to do speaking engagements because the book hadn't come out yet. I had a few consulting clients at a time, but then the book came out and it started to get popular. It sold 250,000 copies, and so now I got all these emails. And what made me successful as a writer now was the one thing I didn't have time to do anymore, because I kept getting distracted by all this other stuff. Not only at work, in my personal life, right? I would sit down with my daughter and I'd check my phone. I would be with my friends and I'd check my phone. I'd say I was going to exercise and I wouldn't. I'd say I would eat right and I didn't. And so that's when I kind of came to this conclusion of, what skill, what power would I really like in my life? And this power to be indistractable really kind of came to mind as Wouldn't it be just great if I did what I said I was going to do, if I could live with personal integrity? That's really what being indistractable is all about.
Live with personal integrity. I love that so much because it's so true. I feel like we make these promises to ourselves and then we break them over and over again. And it had to feel, I know that when I read Hooked, I was like, oh, look at all of these great ways that you can go and bring people in, which can be for good or not for, I mean, sometimes it's just, I just want people to come and use the app over and over and over again. You must get so many people that reach out to you.
Yeah.
And that's their number one purpose.
But fundamentally, if a product does not address people's needs, right? So in the Hooked model, it's these 4 steps. And fundamentally, there's this one step called the variable reward phase. And so if the reward isn't rewarding, if it doesn't scratch a user's itch, if it doesn't give them what they came for, and people aren't stupid, right? People learn pretty quickly. If the product isn't giving them what they need, they stop using it. Yeah. And so the real problem, I would argue, is not that a few companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram suck us in. Right. The real problem is that far too many products suck. That's the real problem, right?
Yes,
That's the real, that, I think way more companies should use these techniques. If you think about, the average SaaS software or enterprise software, your local business, government services, oh my God, these are terrible products. They are so hard to use. Yeah. And if you think about it, actually, so when I wrote Hooked, the problem that everyone was complaining about back then was, why is technology so difficult to use? Do you remember these days, right? It's only nerds and geeks who can use technology. Why won't the tech makers make things normal people can use? Well, now we don't hear that so much anymore because the products are so well made, but it hasn't kind of trickled down to the rest of business to use these same tactics to help people do things that they themselves want to do, but for lack of good product design don't do.
Well, and that's what I thought was really interesting about Indistractable is that instead of demonizing the technology itself, which is really easy to do, and you hear people do it all the time, Apple comes out and they now are telling you how much time you've spent on your phone, just automatically baking that in because they know that people are concerned about the time that they're spending on their phones.
Right.
However, you tell the story within Indistractable about how you discovered that once you put yourself on a tech diet, that it wasn't necessarily the phone that was the thing that was distracting you anyway. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I write books when I encounter a problem that I can't find a good solution for with what's currently out there. So I've had hundreds of different ideas for a spark of a book, and then I'll research that topic. I'll buy every book I can find that addresses it. And 9 times out of 10, somebody's already written a really good book on the topic, and I say, well, that's it. That solved my problem. Now I know what to do. I've acquired that skill. I have this new understanding. Terrific. But once in a while, as in the case of these 2 books, I couldn't find a solution to that question that I was looking for. So with Hooked, I knew that the future of product design product and service design would involve building habits, that would be very important. But I couldn't find a book that was about how to build habit-forming products, so I decided to write it. The same with Indistractable. I looked for books on how to fight distraction, how to be more focused, and all the books basically said the same thing. And the advice was, get rid of the distraction, right? And a generation ago, that distraction was television. Before that, the distraction was radio. Before that, rock and roll. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's every new generation's technology. That's the thing that's apparently melting our brains, and it's never the case. Today, I read over a dozen books that published in the last few years, and they all basically say, get rid of your devices, get rid of your technology. One, that's really impractical, right? It's nice for a university professor without a social media account to say, well, stop using social media, but what about us who depend on it for our livelihood?
Absolutely.
Right? We need it to propagate our message, to get the word out there, to connect with like-minded people. These are wonderful tools. So one, we can't just stop using it. You'll get fired if you stop checking email. And 2, it doesn't work, or at least it didn't work for me. So I used to be clinically obese, and I remember I would go on these fad diets, and I would do, kind of like the digital detoxes today. Yeah. I did these food detoxes, and I'd say, okay, 30 days, no fast food. And then you know what happened on day 31, right?
Right, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. I make up for lost time, right? Give me the fries and a big shake because now I can reward myself. And so the reason that those fad diets don't work, the temporary nature of them, is the same reason why these digital detoxes don't work either, because we're not addressing the real reason why we get distracted. That it's not just about the thing that's distracting us, it's about this deeper layer that we have to understand.
Yeah, I mean, and I fell down that hole too, where I was like, okay, I'm gonna just turn off my phone. I'm gonna put it in the other eye. That's it. I am not going to have my phone with me. And a couple of days of that, I'm only gonna check twice a day, Okay, so that I was able to sort of white knuckle it. First day I was fine. This is a relief. It's like a vacation. Second one, it was like, oh. Third one, I fall off the wagon. And then, I was essentially like this for the next 3 days. It was
catching up.
It was catching up. It was binging. It was like the scroll. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And so
it didn't work for me either. That's exactly right. Yeah.
But you talk about getting to the heart of the pain.
Right.
You say it really all goes to pain avoidance. We're trying to avoid pain and identifying what that is. And you have several exercises within the book in Indistractable where you can go through, and one of them is this building awareness, which I think it was really annoying because I didn't want to build awareness and I really fought it. In fact, I only made it through a day of it, but I just littered a page. Every time I was distracted, I would write down by what and what I was feeling, what was I supposed to be doing in the first place. And it was fascinating to me because it was mostly stuff, I'm supposed to be doing this one thing that I don't want to do. Usually it was because I felt like I didn't know what the next step was, or I was worried that it wouldn't be the right thing. And then I would go research. I would go, let me go and make sure. Let me see if there's something else. What's the latest research on this? And then an hour later, I come back. And it was that pain avoidance.
Right.
So that was kind of a cruel thing to discover.
So this is the icky, sticky truth that we don't like to address, that we like to blame what's called the external triggers, the pings, the dings, the rings, all of these things that lead us towards distraction. But when we really get down to the source of why we get distracted, the external triggers certainly play a role, right? If you're working at your desk and I come by and say, hey, can I talk to you for a quick second? Or let me tell you some office gossip. That is an external trigger, just like your phone notification going off. That can lead you towards distraction. But it turns out what is a much more common source of distraction, the reason that I have people do this distraction tracking exercise, is that you will find that the majority of the reason why you go off track, in terms of, if you count them out, you will find that most distractions don't start from outside of us, but in fact, they start from within. And that they are triggered by what's called an internal trigger rather than an external trigger. And so these internal triggers are responses to an uncomfortable emotional state. It's when we're feeling bored, lonely, uncertain, fatigued, anxious. It's what we do in response to these uncomfortable sensations that leads us towards either distraction or traction. So we've got traction and distraction. Traction is any action that we do that moves us towards what we want to do, things that we are doing with intent. The opposite of traction is distraction, anything that moves us away from what we plan to do with intent. So this is really important for two reasons. Number one, anything can be a distraction. Right? So when this used to happen to me all the time, I would sit down at my desk and I say, okay, now I'm going to work on that big project. I'm going to do that thing that I plan to do. Finally, I'm going to do it right after I check email. Right after I do some research. Yeah, exactly. Right after I do some research, whatever the case might be. And I think, well, that's worky. That's kind of a thing I have to do anyway, right? Email's got to get answered, but that's pseudo work. Because anything that you didn't plan to do with your time is a distraction by definition. Whereas anything you plan to do, so just like anything can be a distraction, anything can be traction. So that's why I say, I don't appreciate these tech critics who say, oh, Facebook's evil, or playing a Candy Crush is terrible. Look, if you plan to do it, if that's what you want to do with your time, why is watching a movie on Netflix morally inferior to watching football on TV? What's the difference? There is no difference. As long as you plan to do it on your schedule, not on the app makers, not on somebody else's schedule, but if it's according to your values and you plan to do it, enjoy it. Don't feel guilty about it. So what I want to give people is this amazing feeling that I didn't get until after I did this research and put this plan in place that I talk about in Indistractable. This amazing feeling that you get when you get to the end of your day and you did everything you were supposed to do. Like that is such an amazing feeling. It's an you'll get there. You'll get there. When you use these techniques, you can get to the end of your day and say, you know what? I'm going to go on Facebook for an hour. I'm going to watch something on Netflix without the guilt of, oh my God, I have this to-do list of 99 more things that I didn't get to. Those techniques I find just didn't cut it, because you're constantly thinking about what's left on the to-do list. What didn't I get to yet? As opposed to saying, here's what I said I would do, and here's what I did, and that's good enough. That's perfect. That's where that amazing feeling comes from.
And I love that idea that you are the guardian of your day. I mean, you're once you're able to focus and you have that focus time where you have done the things you said you were going to do. All right, and that's integrity. You've done the things you've said you're going to do. You know you did the things you said you were going to do. You can shut it off.
Yeah.
You actually can give yourself the permission to turn it off. And I think that is maybe where, a lot of us lose our personal time, is that we allow work to bleed into our off hours because maybe we feel like we didn't get everything done we should have.
I think it's also a factor of how we're taught to get things done. So this is what I used to do. I believed in this myth of the to-do list. The myth of the to-do list says that if you just put stuff on a to-do list, it all magically gets done somehow. I don't know how that works. Like, I need that hairy.
It's so good. It's so organized. It's just all the stuff that needs to be done.
But I mean, it's a good first step. It's not that it's a bad thing, but I want to know where that Harry Potter spell is to actually do that stuff that's on my list, because that was always the problem, right? And so the problem just keeping a to-do list is you do 3 or 4 tasks. You have a very productive day. You did 3 or 4 things. You cranked them out. Unbelievable. But then you look at that to-do list and you still have 97 things that you didn't do. And so you're carrying this guilt with you all day long of the stuff you didn't get to. And ironically, the more anxiety you have, the more stress you have, the more likely you are to do what? To seek distraction. How many times have you looked for distraction because of all the stuff you have to do? How ironic is that, right?
But it's so true. It's so true. Why, when I've got all of this stuff weighing on me, is it now that I'm just feeling compelled to go binge watch?
You should be more motivated, right? The more stuff you have to do, you would think more pressure would make us do that. That's not how it works. It actually backfires because, back to what we were talking about before, the nature of distraction, the reason we do these things is because we are looking to avoid uncomfortable sensations. So instead of this massive to-do list, we use a different technique that we call time boxing. And time boxing says that if you have something on your to-do list, it has to have a place on your calendar. So that you planned out, this is how, not what am I going to accomplish. Remember, the to-do list is output. It's not input. Think about how ridiculous this is in any other thing, in any other type of work other than knowledge work, right? If you go to a baker and you say, I need 100 loaves of bread, and he or she's going to say, no problem. I need the flour, I need the salt, I need the sugar, I need the yeast. Where's all the input so I can make you the output? That would be very logical. And yet for knowledge workers, for people who work in the office, we have all this output without considering where the input is coming from. Where's the input? The one thing we can always control, we can't control how quickly we'll get through those tasks. The one thing we can always control is the input of time. And so that's why it is so critical to plan that time in our day. Not to say, I'm going to finish this, I'm going to finish this. Nuh-uh, that's not what we do. We say, I'm going to spend an hour doing this.
Why are we so bad at this?
It's study after study have found that we are terrible at predicting output. One is because we don't foresee all of the distractions, right? We know what to do. What we don't know how to do is how to stop getting distracted. So we can't predict that Jimmy's going to come over and want to talk to us, or that we're going to get this urgent interruption, or that this is going to happen. Those are all things that interrupt our processes, doing this output. And so we don't have the mechanics, we don't have the system in place to prevent those distractions. So if we can learn how to avoid distraction, that's actually the secret that I think is not really discussed. Because look, we all basically know what to do. Who doesn't know to get in shape? We all know kind of the basics. Yeah, we all know that. Right, or that to get, to improve at your job, you have to do the work, right? If you want to have a good relationship, you have to be fully present. We know this stuff, and if you don't know it, Google it. Everybody can find what to do. The problem is that it's not just about doing the right thing, it's about avoiding doing the wrong thing. And we don't know how to do that. We don't have this skill set around how to be indistractable.
Well, so, and that actually reminds me of the situation that we have, especially in associations, where a lot of people are road warriors. In fact, the people who are here today, most of you have been on the road. I know, actually more than half of you have been on the road within the past week. And so you can't control your environment really, well, when you're dependent, when you're traveling. Of course, whether it's planes, trains, or automobiles. It's very difficult and obviously stressful. So there you add the stress on top of it, and you can see where that can lead to a lot more of a problem with controlling your time and controlling the way that you're able to be indistractable. What do you have recommendations for people who just face this on a regular basis?
Right. So step number one to becoming indistractable is mastering the internal triggers, is understanding what is it that is driving you towards distraction. So there's all kind of tactics that we can use to make sure that we can deal with those uncomfortable emotional states in a healthy way that leads us towards traction rather than distraction. So that's step one. If you can't come to grips with the fact that the reason you are looking for a distraction and not doing what you say you do is because you're looking to escape anxiety, stress, uncertainty, fatigue, if we don't face that fact, we're doomed. We're always going to find distraction one way or another. So that's the first step. And you can use that whether you work from home, on the road, work in an office. That has to be the first step. For teaching our kids how to be indistractable, it's about understanding and mastering these internal triggers. Then we make time for traction. So it's about planning our day. And when we when we have a regular work routine, that becomes much easier. So when we get to the office at a certain time, when we go home at a certain time, when we're at work at a certain time, we can plan time. This is the time I'm going to check email. This is the time I'm going to have meetings, etc. Most people find that they can do that within a cycle of about 1 week's time. So that's what I recommend. For most folks, we sit down for 15 minutes. It's in my calendar to do this every week. I sit down for 15 minutes and I plan my week ahead. Okay, and I do that in a time box way. And then what I want you to do is to synchronize that schedule with your boss, and if it's important to you, if it's according to your values, with your domestic partners, right, with your family. So that schedule sync process helps us set expectations. And I think that's the answer to your question of what do we do on the road. There's that saying that happiness equals expectations minus reality. And the problem is, is that our
that one sink in.
Think that. Okay, so happiness equals expectations minus reality. Yeah. And I think what tends to happen, and this is also perpetuated by this myth of the to-do list, that it's so easy to put stuff on your to-do list. But I want to make it a little harder to put stuff on your to-do list for every day, or at least what you see. You can put stuff on your someday list, right, if you don't intend to actually get those done. But if you actually need to get things done, it has to not only be on your to-do list, it has to be in your calendar. And so that's why, as a technique that we can even use on the road, even though we're constantly going from one thing to another, by planning the night before or even the morning of, and saying, these are my expectations in terms of not what will I get done, but how will I spend my time? Yeah. And so what feels so good at the end of the day is, look, my goal wasn't finish this, finish that, because many times you don't have control over it. You're doing a presentation, but Janet didn't get you the numbers and John didn't get you the graphics or whatever. You can't control that. So stop worrying about the output. What you need to worry about is the input. Did I spend an hour at my desk working on the presentation? Did I spend 30 minutes making sales calls? Did I do the time spent, not necessarily the output? And so that's how we level set expectations with reality and aren't in this constant cycle of feeling bad about ourselves because now we have a gap, right? Expectations far exceeded what we wanted to accomplish.
I have to tell you, I'm over here trying to just wait because I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling guilty in my mind as you're talking about this because I know that the reason I don't put things in my calendar when I and schedule them and time box them, because I'm learning from you that that's what I need to do. And the reason why is because there have been times in my past, recent past, and over again, repeatedly, when I've put things in and I didn't do them. And they made me feel guilty. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to schedule them in my calendar because if I can, yes, okay, good, I'm not the only one. And I don't want to schedule them in there, like this is the time that I'm going to work on my book or something, because I don't want to let myself down again.
Or you may have to actually do the thing that you don't really enjoy doing.
I might have to
I hear you.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, I've totally been there. That's why I wrote the book.
So bad. It's so bad. And that's like you're setting yourself up for failure, right? Because you're already deciding that I might bail on my own decision to do something.
So look, just take a minute to listen to yourself for a second and hear all of the feelings you just expressed. Yeah. Right? That's not about I don't have enough time. It's about the feelings you are looking to escape.
The painful feelings. Yes.
It's about those internal triggers. And so the way we disarm those internal triggers is by understanding first that they exist, as opposed to saying, you know, people tend to fall into a few different categories when it comes to distraction. We have the blamers. The blamers say, oh, it's my iPhone, it's Facebook, it's those companies doing it to me.
Yeah.
Those are the blamers. The shamers, they say, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm deficient. This is what I used to do. I'm deficient somehow. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I have a short attention span. Something's wrong with me. And neither of those answers work, particularly the shaming aspect, because shame sends you down this spiral of negativity. So again, we're back to generating more internal triggers, more uncomfortable sensations. And what is the solution for these uncomfortable sensations for many people? More distraction.
Right.
And so that doesn't work either. So we don't want to be blamers. We don't want to be shamers. We want to be claimers. Claimers say,
Ooh, that's good.
It's
That's
not
good. Claimers.
Exactly. Claimers say they claim responsibility. They acknowledge this isn't my fault, right? You didn't invent email. You didn't invent that delicious dessert at the local bakery, right? You didn't invent Dunkin' Donuts or whatever is tempting you. You didn't invent those things. Those aren't your fault, but it is your responsibility, right? Because they're not going away. So the idea here is that we can take these simple practices. There's this great quote by Paul Kahilo, I think you pronounce his name. He said that a mistake twice repeated is a decision. Such a good quote.
It's
a mistake.
Decision.
It's a decision that getting distracted once, no problem, happens all the time. But why do we keep making these mistakes time and time again, right? So the idea here is so that now you understand why you got distracted. Only 3 reasons: external trigger, internal trigger, or a planning problem. That's the source of every single distraction in our life. And so now you can look back at that and say, without shame, without guilt, what can I do to put a practice in place so that I don't keep getting distracted by the same thing again and again? And if you don't, now it's become a decision. Now that's something you actually wanted to do. So the idea is to use these systems in place to make sure we don't keep getting distracted by the same thing.
I love this so much. Are you excited too?
Yeah.
All right, so here's where we are. I want to be able to let you ask your questions as well, okay? I want you to be able to ask your questions because you guys who aren't here right now, they're here. They get to ask their questions right here to his face. And so I want to definitely include that. And I'm also understanding that inside I want to go into Hooked a little bit and talk about how to create things for associations that will break through the noise, right? So I've got this war going on inside, but I want to definitely take the time right now while we're talking about this to see what's coming up for you. What are you guys feeling? What are the questions? What do you have? Yes, Lauren.
So I love that we're having this conversation because this is what I focus on every day with my clients. They're constantly bombarded and sorting through things and trying to prioritize and feel like they're failing miserably. So I wanted to add something else to your blame, shame, and claim and add the reframe.
Reframe.
We need to co-author this. This is Indistractable too.
I just put out an ebook called Prioritization Hacks, 5 Key Tools to Maximize Your Day. And it includes Eisenhower's matrix and ways of sorting things out.
Yeah.
But it's really about the power of choice. So if it's on your calendar and you don't have choice behind it, why are you setting yourself up to feel like crap?
Right.
And how do you want to feel? So that's where the reframe comes in, of like setting the intention of not the outcome, but what is the intended result for you and how you want to feel, and really just like owning the task as your own and making it your bleep.
Yeah. So there's interesting. You bring up there's some really interesting research I talk about in Indistractable about what type of work environment is associated with anxiety and depression. You know, not like medical grade depression, anxiety disorder. There's a type of work environment that literally is making people mentally ill. And that work environment has nothing to do with what you are doing. You know, if you ask me what kind of jobs would make people depressed, I would say, oh, maybe it's a mortician or somebody who has to put animals to sleep as a veterinarian. I don't know. Turns out it has nothing to do with what you do. It has to do with the environment within which you do it in. And so it turns out that the confluence of 2 factors, work environments with high expectations coupled with low control, that if you have high expectations and high control, you're fine. People can thrive in that environment. But if you can't control the output, right? If you have all these demands placed on you, it's kind of like that classic episode of I Love Lucy, where she gets a job in a chocolate factory, and she has to wrap each chocolate, and then the manager, she's doing a great job and she's wrapping all the chocolates, and then her manager comes in and says, oh, you're doing a great job. crank it up, right? Let's increase the expectations.
She's like,
And now
"Oh."
she has no control. She can't do it fast enough. So she
Right.
stuffs them in her pocket, in her hat, she eats them. And it's hilarious on I Love Lucy.
It's not so funny.
Not so
right?
funny in real life.
When it's
Exactly.
happening to us.
Exactly.
Because it's too close to home.
Right,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And and ironically, what happens in these circumstances when people feel more of the anxiety, uncertainty, even depression disorder that comes from these type of work environments, again, back to this principle of what do people do when they feel these internal triggers, when they feel uncomfortable, what do? To grasp a sense of control, a sense of agency, they send more superfluous emails. They conduct more meetings that didn't need to happen. So not only do they distract themselves, they distract all their colleagues, right?
Wow.
And so that makes things
so
worse throughout the
bad.
enterprise because people are grasping for control and agency.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about that though. It's worth us caring about the people next to us, making sure that they're indistractable too, because otherwise they're going to come and bother all of us, right?
Yes.
Like if the altruistic thing didn't work for you, selfishly think about what's happening.
Right, but the first step is to become indistractable ourselves,
Yeah.
right? So half the book is just about what you can do on your own to become indistractable. But then, I'm not so naive to think that our environments don't shape our behaviors. Of course they do, particularly in the workplace, right? If your boss calls you at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, that even if you say I'm indistractable, well, you got to pick up the phone if you don't want to miss if you don't want to get
A lot of
fired.
Bosses don't care.
Right.
You're not indistractable. Yeah, you'll be really
Yeah.
indistractable when you're fired.
Exactly. So there's only so much we can do on our own. But then we have to ask ourselves, well, what's to blame there? Is it the phone your boss used to call you? Is it the technology? Or is it the fact that you work at a company with the kind of culture that's allowed, that's permissible?
So let me go ahead and transition to a different type of question, because you wrote Hooked, and as we're talking about this, we are adapting to figure out how to become more indistractable and how to sort of moderate our use of technology, become more aware of the way we're using our time. As association executives and people who work in the association space, we have to know that all the members who are out there are fighting this same battle. They're all doing the same thing. And if we want to reach them and get them engaged, we have to be thinking about, well, what's that thing that's going to make them come to us and pay attention to us in the midst of, maybe they've read Indistractable. We don't want to be on the list of things that are like considered just straight out a distraction all the time. Right? So how can we better create those types of things that are going to get them hooked in a positive way, and create a habit that is something that is good for them?
Yeah. So a lot of companies struggle with this problem of frequency. So the number one criteria that we need to have in place before we can build a habit-forming product or service is sufficient frequency. And the studies tell us that the cutoff point is a week's time or less. That if people are not engaging with your product or service within a week's time or less, it is very difficult to change a customer habit. So when we think about...
let me hold on to that for a second. Wow, everybody got it?
Yeah.
A week or less. Okay, so we've got to make sure we're engaging within that time.
At least a week's time. And of course, the more frequently people will engage, the more likely they are to change their habits. So when we think about our cell phones, why are our cell phones so habit forming? Well, the average smartphone user is checking their home screen 150 times a day on average. Right? So very high habit forming potential with these devices we carry around with us. So what do we do if we have the kind of product or service that just isn't engaged with all that frequently? Maybe you hold one annual conference a year. Well, to form a habit with an annual conference is never going to happen. It just will not happen, right? They might keep coming back if they like the content, but it will never be something done out of habit, right? It will require a conscious thought. And not that every business has to be habit forming. It's only if your business model necessitates unprompted user engagement, people coming to your website, checking your app, interacting with you in some way. If that's necessitated by your business model, well, then you've got to figure out a way to form a habit. So it's not that every business or service needs to be habit forming. It's that every business or service that needs to be habit forming has to have a hook.
So let me just reframe this for associations. In associations, we know that engagement, the more engagement you have, the higher the perceived value is for your membership or your volunteering, whatever that happens to be. So for associations, most of the time, we're going to want to figure out how to develop some kind of habit in building a relationship and building something where they're coming back to us on a regular basis so that they can build that value. They see that value.
Right. Because if there's a worry of, people get your bill and say, well, what do I get out of this? Why am I a member of this association? I only go to the annual conference. Is that really worth it? They're only judging you on that one experience. And the risk there is that some competitor, whether it's a direct competitor or somebody else vying for that budget of a conference budget, and there's so many endless conferences, can swoop your customer away unless you form a habit with them. Habits are a huge competitive advantage.
Let's talk about how we do that, because we talked about the 2 C's.
Right.
Okay.
So what do we do when we have a product that is just not used with sufficient frequency? What do we do about that? So there are the 2 C's, content and community. So if you have the,
you guys know.
Anytime I say something that gets a shimmy, that's good news.
Sorry about the shimmy.
It's spontaneous. I love it.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? So let me give you some examples from the business world. So when it comes to content, for example, so Williams-Sonoma is a cookware company. They know that people will never buy cookware out of a habit. You just don't buy pots and pans every week. It just doesn't happen. So what do? They created a content consumption habit that they bolted on to their product experience. So they started a website called Taste. It's a website that has consistently received very high marks from people who love cooking related topics. Twice a day, they crank out interesting content, recipes and interviews and all kinds of interesting content. That's what people get habituated to, is the content consumption habit, so that when it is time to buy cookware, where do they go? They go to Williams-Sonoma because they're in this content consumption habit. So the mantra is that monetization is a result of engagement, not the other way around. Monetization is a result of engagement. So if you can keep people engaged, what they will eventually do is monetize in some way. Okay, so that's content.
I see all kinds of notes happening right now, which means you just hit something really important for people that they want to remember. And you guys, and I see tweets. I know that's tweets going out. So that is really, I feel, so key for every single association executive out there to think about, because this really is what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring people in. They're trying to break through the noise, but they don't know how often. They don't know with what. They don't know exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing, and how does this all create a better ROI?
Yeah.
And that's the big question. Is this content leading us to a better ROI, a better bottom line? And the answer is, it can.
It definitely can. Now we can't. So a lot of people have used content in the past, right? They're putting out a newsletter or a monthly magazine or whatever the case might be. What I want to encourage more companies to do is to find more frequent ways to engage with customers. And the secret that I think a lot of companies don't pick up on is called the investment phase. And I describe it in Hooked. It's this part of the product experience where the user puts something into the product to make it better with use. Now, this is revolutionary. This is what technology facilitates that wasn't possible before. So if you think about in the history of manufacturing, Henry Ford is quoted with saying, we don't know if he actually said it, but people think he said, if you want, you can have any color of Model T as long as it's black. Now, why did he say that? Because it was really hard to retool a factory to give you a blue car and you a red car and you a green car. Well, today with current technology, we can give everyone their own customized experience through what I call this investment phase. It's called stored value. So the more you use the product, the more you interact with the association, does the experience get better with use? Are you collecting data, content, skill, followers, something that makes the product better and better with use? That is something that so many businesses can do and almost nobody does today. And I think that's the future. The future will be that every product and service we interact with, we want it to get better every time, right? We want that product experience to improve, but for many of us, we don't do that. We don't take that opportunity to improve the product with use.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that are coming up for me right now. Selfishly, I want to go deeper into that for association chat and all things there, but I don't want to forget about the community part.
Yeah.
We talked about content. Talk to me about community.
So community is another habit-forming experience that we can bolt on to a non-habit-forming product. And so the experience I like to share is the Hallmark Keepsake Ornament Club. Are you by chance a member of this club?
I am not.
You're not, okay.
So I missed out on that.
Yes, so you're not, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So many people aren't. I'm not a member. 300,000 Americans are, however, members of this club. And to my amazement, if you think about a product that is not bought frequently, Christmas ornaments are not bought every week, right? And yet, in the middle of July, you will see in front of Hallmark stores, you will see lines out the door in the middle of July. Why? What's that about? Turns out that the Hallmark Keepsake Ornament Club, one of the benefits of joining this club, I know this is like an advertisement for them, I don't have any affiliation. One of the benefits, right, get this, is if you are a member of the club, you are invited to unpack the ornaments when they're shipped to the store.
You've got to be kidding.
I know, right?
But it's an experience.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing.
My gosh.
So, but why do people do it? Why do people do it? Is it because of the ornaments? It's because when you go unpack the ornaments, you'll see Jimmy and you'll see Becky and you'll see Margaret.
Collect them too.
Exactly.
Look at this.
So
Look at
what they're
them.
selling, they're selling ornaments.
Wow.
But what really is bringing people back is the need for connection. It's to be understood by others and understand them yourself. And so that is why people keep coming back. And they're on message boards and they're emailing each other and they're communicating back and forth every day for some of these folks. That's the habit, which then leads to monetization.
So association chat, folks, you want to go unpack my trunk? Because we can like totally just like clean it out together. It'll be a bonding experience. It'll be awesome. No, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So how could we use that for associations? What are some things that we could do that makes people come together in a unique, weird way?
And today, tech facilitated. It used to be like, if I live
Yeah.
in the middle of the country and, I'm 100 miles from any living soul, I was all by myself,
Yeah.
right? But now I can congregate with people who have like-minded interests wherever they are online. And so the question is, are we using that? Are we utilizing some kind of community forums, maybe, online and offline? People
Right.
love to get together offline as well. Are we facilitating those interactions so that, again, the result of engagement is eventual monetization?
And then here's a question, it's then why are people doing it so poorly? Why is it we have all of this technology, we have all of these different ways to come together.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it would be simple,
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things going on. One, this technology is still relatively new, right? A lot of folks don't have the technical chops to do this. It's becoming easier and easier to do, but it's still relatively new. And I think a lot of people have this mindset of, use us when something terrible happens, right? That's when you call us. The problem is that a lot of people don't even remember you exist when they really need you, and that's the real tragedy, right? That's the shame. If you think about for an association, you want people to remember you and be top of mind all the time, so that if they really need you, that you're the first place they call.
Yeah.
And so that I think that would really behoove us to find those ways to interact with people frequently enough to form a habit, so that we are constantly top of mind.
Wow, so much. Okay, so any questions from anyone right now about this part, about the creating habit forming products and experiences, I'll say?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in your research around community, did you see any data or anything that led to any opinions on the involvement of, well, in our case would be an association's involvement within that community versus allowing them to kind of roam free, if you will, and create their own sub-communities within that? I'm sure with Hallmark, a big part of that is they're leading that community. They're doing a lot with their catalogs and other things in that group. No, I'm not a member.
Yet.
Right, not
yeah,
yet.
yeah. You were talking about it on the radio the other day. So, they do a lot to promote within that community.
Yeah.
Right. So I was hoping.
Yeah, it's contextually specific to the group, right? Some groups need more hand-holding, they need more moderation. That's really specific to the type of group. Things can go off the rails, right? Sometimes you need to moderate these type of experiences. But oftentimes what we see is that people will congregate. So I wouldn't be surprised if for many associations, they might not be aware that their members are already in, I see some nodding heads, right? That the members are already doing this. And by the way, that's a terrific sign. One of the ways that we look for a habit-forming product experience is to look for what's called nascent behaviors. What are people doing that's kind of unconventional, that they had to stitch together their own solution to get what they really want? And then, of course, what we want to do is to bring them under our wing to say, oh, wow, there's some validation here that people really do want this. How can we involve them in our organization? How do we support them? How do we help them? It could be to say, okay, here is our official message board, here's our official community, here's our official events. It might also be saying, you know what, conduct your own events, those are your responsibility, but how can we assist? Can we provide you additional funding, resources, tools, techniques, whatever it might be? That's really going to be up to each organization.
I know, everyone's, yes, Kiki, yes, yes, I hear you. So thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much for being a part of today, of this interview. It is such a pleasure and a blessing to be able to meet you and talk with you today for Association Chat. Yes.
My pleasure.
So everyone, Hooked, Indistractable, obviously, if you don't have it, you need to pick them up. Some wonderful pearls of wisdom here. And if people want to find more information out about you, where can they go?
Yeah, thanks. So my website is called Nir and Far, Nir like my first name, N-I-R, so nirandfar.com. And if you go to Indistractable.com, we have an 80-page workbook that's complimentary, as well as if you get the book, we have this video course as well that comes with the book as well. So if you type in your purchase order number, whether you get on Amazon or a bookstore, doesn't matter, and you'll get access to this video as well. And that's all at Indistractable.com.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thanks. Thank you.
So what we're going to do now is, hopefully, if it's okay with you, those of you who brought books to sign, we can, and I have books to sign,
Sure.
we can sign some books. If you want pictures, maybe get some pictures. Yeah. And if you have additional questions, like this is more of the informal part, we'll be able to just chat, and I'm so thankful.
Oh, my
for
pleasure.
this.
Thank you
I
so
love
much for
it.
having me.
All
I
right,
really appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. That was fun. Thanks.
All right.